Hello. Kind of a random time to do a podcast, I know. But winter break, it's a beautiful thing. Is it a Friday? I think it is. Friday, December 30th. I've lost every sense of what day it is or is not. And we are getting ready for Florida. So, let's get rolling. It is the 200 level, episode 311. See you in Tampa. Mike Carpenter here on a Friday afternoon. It is December 30th as we approach the end of 2022. And I'm basically packed. My wife and I got one suitcase that we're checking for the flight down and back. And I got basically nothing but orange and blue. And best of all, I'm only taking shorts. We're looking at 75 degrees on January 1st when we get down there. We're looking at 82 degrees and sunny on the 2nd and the 3rd, flying back on the 4th. And I have to say that as we're getting closer to this and I'm watching other bowl games, my excitement for the Reliaquest Bowl is growing. Now, one thing to get out of the way, of course, I still wish it was the Outback Bowl. In fact, on the way out of town to our Michigan Christmas on the 26th, we're driving north Champaign and we see the Outback Steakhouse, and I thought, man, that name, that bowl game for 20 plus years, that was my first thing that I watched on New Year's Day. And to me, New Year's Day is a holiday that I actually hold in higher esteem than New Year's Eve. Because what we used to do as a family is we'd wake up on New Year's Day and we go to Village Inn Pizza. And if you're a Champaign or Urbana town, you remember Village Inn. We'd go there at 11 a.m. We'd get pizza, we'd get nachos, and we would watch the Outback Bowl and then the Citrus Bowl. We'd play whatever arcade games they had in the game room. And that was something, I don't want to say formative, but I guess as a fan, as a football fan, it kind of was. Dating all the way back to 2001 when Illinois started 8-1 and they beat Penn State at home in November. It was a really exciting game, and my dad and I were leaving the stadium. And I remember thinking, not sugar, not rose, but man, we're probably going to be playing a January 1st bowl game. What about the Outback Bowl? Well, sure, it's not the Outback Bowl anymore, but you know what? I'm going to treat it as such. And Illinois is playing in essentially a New Year's Day game. Yes, it is January 2nd because the NFL will be playing on the 1st. But for all intents and purposes, this Illinois team in year 2 of Bret Bielema is playing in a New Year's Day bowl game. That is a remarkable accomplishment. And what I wanted to start this episode by doing, at least, was reflecting on the season. I mean, it is very easy to get caught up in how things ended. And I'm not going to turn a blind eye to the way the last 4 weeks unfolded for this team. But we need to also remember that the first 8-9 weeks of the season were remarkably good. And just reflecting back on that opening week against Wyoming, there was a sense that this team was going to be more efficient offensively and that the defense had not lost a step. And that was just judging it based on one game and a Wyoming team that I don't know what their record was, and maybe someone in the chat thread, you might know how Wyoming finished. I don't know if they finished above 500 or not. But regardless, you dominated them so thoroughly that I thought this thing is still trending in the right direction. And then Indiana happened. And if you were one of those that tuned in on that Friday night with me until like 11:30, midnight, I was pissed. But I was pissed because it felt like this team had something. And they showed it for major stretches of that Indiana game, but they couldn't get out of their own way. So at that point, I'm really rescinding, or I should say kind of taking back the expectations of a 7-5 season and thinking, damn, you know, this whole reclamation project of Bret Bielema is going to take time because you kind of have to teach the stupid out of them. You have to teach the winning into them. And it's not as if the next week against Virginia cured everything, but the way that you completely dismantled a Virginia team that had dismantled you the year before was very encouraging. Now, I was still very, what would the word be? Stubbornly not going into the stadium that Saturday because I wanted to send a message that I'm not buying in until they give me reason to buy in. But the way they played against Virginia led me into that stadium the following Thursday against Chattanooga. And the way that they dismantled a good FCS team, right, was further indication that things were trending the right way. And then you had a 9-10 day stretch before the Wisconsin game. And if we really want to pinpoint a moment in this season, there are 2 weeks that I'll go with. The first one is the Wisconsin game because in many ways that was an arrival. Now, at the time, we didn't know what kind of arrival that would be or to what extent. But if you would have told me after that Wisconsin game you're going 8-4, keep in mind at that point you would have been 4-1. If you would have said 8-4, I still would have taken it. 4-3 in your last 7 games. Hey, that's a great second year. And the way that you just absolutely slaughtered them led to the firing of Paul Chryst. And of course, there were other issues. Wisconsin had been kind of stagnating for a while, but that was the final straw for that football program, once proud football program, that's not going to allow that to happen. Now, before I go any further in this in the season and that magical month of October, which is what it was, yes, of course, Paul Chryst getting fired led to the coaching carousel that led to Ryan Walters going to Purdue. And chat thread, friends, please don't let me forget touching on the Ryan Walters thing because I got thoughts on that. But would I still do it all over again? Yes. I would take that win against Wisconsin, even if that does mean losing Ryan Walters and losing Kevin Kane. I'm doing that. Losing Hudson Card, fine. That game was very meaningful for an Illini football fan that for 20 years, apart from the game-winning kick by McCourt and maybe the Brandon Lloyd catch in 2001 and then the win against Wisconsin in 2007, I mean, you could count on one hand the triumphs that you'd had over this once awful Wisconsin program that kind of gave you a blueprint of what you as a terrible football program could do if you just had the right head coach. And for Bret Bielema to be that guy, and for him to go into his former school and not just beat them, but resoundingly beat them a year after they resoundingly beat you, that to me was the arrival moment. And I think for a lot of Illini football fans, it was as well. It did not lead to sellout after sellout. That is true. And I think that is the ongoing process that this football program will still have to go through to really get the casual fans on board. I had a teacher I work with that said, I'm not going down there. The football team sucks. And I didn't really get into it with them because I thought, well, they don't. But I understand why their inclination, along with some other casual fans, would be, I'm keeping this at arm's length. They blew it late in the season. More on that later. But you beat Wisconsin, and then that leads to what I think was the best 2-game stretch at home since 2007, when you would have beaten Penn State and then Wisconsin. The Iowa and the Minnesota games were very, very meaningful to me and tens of thousands of Illini fans that were also there, right? The Iowa game, starting with that, was by no means a pretty game, but the catharsis of having won that game when you really had no business winning it, it was more than just beating Iowa. It was the fact that you exercised so many demons. And what I tried to hit on the podcast the very next day was that I damn near got emotional thinking about, holy crap, you won this game, and we saw, like so many previous times at Memorial Stadium, defeat gets snatched from the jaws of victory when it looked like Art Sitkowski fumbled it, and they got the go-ahead score, and you could feel the air just lift out of that stadium, but immediately come back in when they ruled them down. And then you get Fabrizio Pinton. Not Pintone, I want to say Pintone, but Fabrizio Pinton. Remember that name? Yeah, he helped you win 2 massive games in October, including the Iowa one when he went 3 for 3 with field goals. That game was magical. For all its ugliness, that game was magical. And then the following week, you could not have written a better day. Honestly, for my Illini football fandom, I don't know if there's a better day I've had, top to bottom, than beating Minnesota, homecoming, a glorious fall Saturday. Everybody, friends, family, all there. And, not to make a mountain out of a molehill here, but post-COVID, you really do appreciate these gatherings, and that's what tailgating is. That's why I love tailgating, is that you get to bring all these people together, and it's only enhanced when you have a good team. And when I came back out to that tailgate at 2:30 on that Saturday, my wife and my best friends and family, they could sense on my face, as I called the next podcast, a golden glow. It really does enhance your mood when your team is good. And that was the month of October. Bye week, then you beat Nebraska. You go 4-0 in October against teams that, hey, no slouch. I know Nebraska stunk this year. Iowa, by their standards, not good. Same with Wisconsin. But it's not as if you beat Northwesterns and Chattanoogas and, no, Wyoming's all in 1 month. No, this was 4 Big Ten West opponents in 1 month. And yes, then November happened. Upon reflection, it was a disappointment. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The Michigan State game was bad, and the Purdue game was inexcusable. The Michigan game was riding the ship, but unfortunately you rided it against a team that's now in the playoff, and you gave them the best shot they had all season. And I'm not so much into moral victories. If you had just beaten Purdue the week before, it would have been a moral victory. But it didn't really feel that way after you'd blown getting into the Big Ten title game. And then Northwestern, not by any means the best performance this team had, but the defense scoring as much as they did, making the big plays. It was in its own way an explosive end to a season, and I think cathartic for the team. You know, as an Illini football fan, you try to place each season, and I'm taking the 12 games as total. I'm not going to say that November was an outlier. I think this team at the end of the day was an 8-4 team because the Iowa game could have won either way. And unfortunately, the games that could have gone either way in November didn't really go your way. But is 8-4 an accurate record for this team? Yeah, I think so. And I think the promising thing is they were probably closer to a 10-2, certainly, than they were 6-6. To me, that's not just progress, that's massive progress. And as I get ready for this bowl game and reflect on everything that came before and how good of a season this was in its totality, I get more excited for it. As we get into this offseason and we start to see things moving and shaking, you know, there are the initial gut punches of coaches leaving or not getting a transfer quarterback. And then you're quickly reminded with the ease and quickness with which Bielema moves that you probably got the right guy in place. And I think that's the biggest takeaway this season. Ask yourself, when was the last time you felt this confident about the head man of Illini football? And I think for long-term fans, you'd have to say Makovic. We could say Turner. After 2001, we all felt good about that, but really the writing was on the wall with recruiting, right? And then with Ron Zook, the writing was on the wall from the moment you hired him that, yes, he's a great recruiter, but we didn't really bring him in for the X's and O's, right? And that, unfortunately, didn't pan out. But as we sit here, we have a proven commodity that in just 2 short years is taking you from cellar dwellers under Lovie Smith to a New Year's Day bowl game. And it's not going to be the top 5 or top 10 storylines in college football this year because of the way that you played in November. And for Illinois football, it's going to take something miraculous to really get sustained national attention. But for what it is here, from where I sit, from where I sat in the stadium and where I'm going to sit at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, this was a resounding success. And you can't give it an A+, but if you gave it less than an A, I don't think you're considering all the context that went into this. We can hold those two truths. November was disappointing, but the season was a resounding success. And as we get ready for a January 2nd bowl game, noon kickoff Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, as I wake up that morning, I'm going to feel just like I did back in October before Minnesota. I'm going to have that excitement. And, yeah, it's a bowl game. It's a cherry on top. And after we hit the sponsors, I want to talk about why this is actually important and what it can mean going forward. But that was my kind of opening segment spiel on the season at large, which was the most enjoyable season I've had, along with the 01 and 07. And while one was a Big Ten title and another was a Rose Bowl, I got to be honest, I enjoyed this season almost as much as those two. And maybe more so as we go into the future seasons. And this hopefully becomes one that we look on as the building block, the foundational season that really led to long-term success. I get the feeling it will be. All right, before I get too far ahead of myself, got to remind you the 200 level is brought to you by DP Dough online at dpdough.com. And hey, when you're watching all these bowl games, why not order a piping hot calzone delivered to your doorstep at dpdough.com. Custom zones with any topping you want, or some of their favorites like the Maui Wowie or the Buffer Zone online at dpdough.com. Also, Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call today at 217-841-4728. And it's still not too late to get your furnace checked. It was probably working overtime the last week. Unfortunately, we got a nice heat wave hitting us right now. But, yeah, ours certainly worked overtime, but it worked beautifully. And that's thanks to the technicians at Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing checked it out for us. And we went ahead and got our AC tune-up scheduled for March. So these will be our guys going forward. I appreciate Cody and the fellas and the ladies over at Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing. That's 217-841-4728. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Also, State Farm agent Brian Hansen online at brianismyguy.com for life, auto, home, business renters. You name it, Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well. We started with Brian just over 2 years ago. We're going to be with him for the foreseeable future, and it's great State Farm prices, as you would expect. But more importantly, we kind of want to trust our insurance guy, we can with Brian, and his staff makes it super easy and painless on us as well. So that is Brian Hansen, your State Farm agent at brianismyguy.com. And finally, Rector Construction, online at rectorconstruction.com for all your home exterior projects, rectorconstruction.com. And as we get into the spring, which is right around the corner, it's going to be 2023. You should get a free quote on your next home exterior project by going online to rectorconstruction.com. Illini Inquirer and the Champagne Showers Podcast Network partners with the 200 level. And one thing we may do, I know that as people are trying to find Illini podcast, there's this thing called search engine optimization, SEO, basically making yourself easier to find when someone searches for something. So you may see a longer title for the 200 level with Mike Carpenter. You might see a colon and then an Illinois Fighting Illini fan podcast or something like that. Reason being, it will make it easier for people to find us when they search Illini football or Illini basketball if we actually have Illini in the title. So just fair warning, if you get into 2023 and your car display has an extremely long title scrolling across, it's still the 200 level. If you can rate and review us, that'd be great at Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And, of course, follow us on YouTube. And some of you are tuning in on this Friday afternoon. Doesn't feel like a Friday. I don't know what day it is. That's what winter break tends to do to me. All right, I want to hit up a few of the chat threads here. Hey, Jason, thanks for tuning in this afternoon. Bobo, as always, chiming in here. Year 2 in a New Year's Bowl, and Illini women are 11-2. What the hell is going on? And by the way, Bobo, to that point, I want to hit this real quick before I forget about it. Shauna Green has done maybe the most impressive turnaround job that I've seen when you consider just how bad Illini women's basketball has been. And I understand that there's a lot of season left to play out. I'm not going to pretend like I've watched a lot of them yet, but the bits I've seen, this is an entertaining team that can shoot the hell out of the ball. You know, we haven't really talked about Illini women's basketball on here because they never gave us reason to. But for any non-revenue sport, and I don't know if women's is on that cusp, I know, they got a huge game on New Year's Day. My family that's staying in town, they're going to go to it. And they're excited, as they should be, because there'll probably be a few thousand people that go to State Farm Center on New Year's Day to see this Illini team that's 11-2, 2-1 in the Big Ten against Iowa. And Caitlin Clark, I think it's Caitlin, who's the highest scoring player in Iowa history and approaching that for D1, I think. She's incredible. So that's a big opportunity and would really put them on the map nationally speaking. But what she's doing is crazy. And, at this point, they would make the NCAA tournament, which I don't know the last time Illinois did that. Did Jolette Law make one? Matt Bolent certainly didn't. Nancy Faye certainly didn't. So we're going 20 years ago? Teresa Grentz? The Allison Curtin era, the tail end of the Teresa Grentz thing. Listen, I remember going to Huff Hall when it was Allison Berggren, right? Was it Allison? Amy Berggren. Starts with an A. All I know is she's the best Illini women's basketball player ever. Ashley Berggren, sorry. Okay, Ashley Berggren was an absolute stud. And some of these games at Huff Hall, the atmosphere in there was incredible. And then there was one Sunday where they, I think, had free admission when Purdue came to town. And they actually, I think, got a sellout at the Assembly Hall. So that was the peak of the Teresa Grentz thing. I see no reason why you can't get something rolling with that and build an atmosphere there. And I got to give the DIA credit for that. They're getting anybody they can in there, including students. My nieces have been to games, and they're becoming huge fans. So they're doing it right, and you might have a pretty damn good coach as well. So that's a great little side story for what are still two relatively healthy revenue programs, right? And we'll get to basketball later. I'll hit that up at the end of it. Also from Bobo, Wyoming, 7-5, currently playing Ohio in a bowl game. So, right, there you go, 7-5. That means they were 7-4 after playing Illinois, so not bad. Bobo says also, I had friends call me crazy at the beginning of the season when I said they would go 8-4. Bobo, I said 7-5, and 8-4 would have been ecstatic for it. And the path that you got there, of course, looking at it from one vantage point, is a disappointment with the way it ended. But again, I'm focusing on the totality of it. 8-4 is very good, and in a second, I'll get into why 9-4 would feel excellent. Jason says, my son Colton, who's fighting cancer, had his spirits lifted by a good Illini season. It was inspiring for him. Jason, well, first off, I wish the best for Colton, and there is something to sports that can have that effect. And we ask ourselves, why do we watch it? Why do we get invested in it emotionally? Why do I record a podcast just spouting off about Illini sports? Because it matters to us. And I can say that, yes, October 2022 was one of the best months of my life. And you'd say, well, why is that? Well, it didn't hurt that Illinois went 4-0 and every tailgate was a blast and it was the talk of the town and that buzz was percolating. And you get to sharing it with people. And I think that's the thing about fandom, and I've mentioned this before. It is both a very personal thing, but also a shared experience. And, going to Tampa with my wife, she's going to be a good sport going the game. I mean, she's going to have fun at it, but we're also going to enjoy the time that we have down there for 3 days in Florida, in the heat. But she also recognizes that when we get to the game that we're going to be in the midst of thousands, tens of thousands of Illini fans. We're about a section away from the Marching Illini. We're going to be in the thick of it, and that's going to be a cool experience. I've never been to an Illini Bowl game. Never have. What the hell am I talking about? Let me rephrase. Went to the Rose Bowl. That's how, I don't want to say it was forgettable, because it wasn't forgettable. The game was not good, and the stadium is kind of a crap hole, which they don't tell you about, because the only views you get on the stadium are from the tip top where you see the mountains. Well, guess what? If you sit anywhere near the field, you don't see the mountains, and it is just an old, dusty crap hole. I don't like the Rose Bowl as a stadium. The game sucked, but it was nice to go to California, and it's also nice to just say you did it. So thank you, Mom and Dad, for that Rose Bowl trip. Yes, I have been to a bowl game. That one didn't go well. I think this one will go better. And why does it matter? Well, let's talk about the difference between 8-5 and 9-4. And it's a good position to be in where 8-5 is the worst case scenario. I remember back in 2019, so this is Lovey's fourth year. They are 6-4. Okay, so they're already bowl eligible with a game at Iowa and then a game against Northwestern at home. And the Iowa game, you hung in there, but you lost. But I still remember thinking that Northwestern game was not an afterthought. That 7-5 is much different than 6-6. Now, I don't know if 9-4 is much different than 8-5, but I do know it sounds better and it feels better. And I don't know what momentum means or does not mean, but I think a bowl win against an SEC team on a New Year's Day bowl, I think it means something. It's not going to ruin my day if Illinois loses, right? When I mentioned the cherry on top, which is kind of what a bowl win is, it's not going to be like, damn it, they lost to Mississippi State, and now I'm going to be pissed off in Tampa, Florida. No. I'm going to have a great time regardless. But am I going to have a better time if Illinois wins? Yeah. It'll be like, let's go to downtown, let's celebrate, let's have a good time. That's exactly what we'll do. Whereas we'd go to downtown Tampa after a loss, but it would be more to just hang out with people, but we wouldn't really be talking about the game. I want to have my cake and eat it too. I think Illini fans want that as well, and I think the team wants it. There is something, I think, beneficial about the way this season ended. It played itself out in the Northwestern game, which was one of, I think, the worst performances by this Illinois team, except they had to get over that hump, right? There was such a mental hurdle that they had to clear from the 3 previous weeks, and they did so with some very explosive plays on defense. So they got over that hump. Okay, exhale. 8-4, sure, you didn't get in the Big Ten title game, but you got into a New Year's Day bowl game in Florida. And now is the real opportunity to just exhale and play ball, which this team hasn't really done, I don't think, since October. November was such a heavy month for this team. Personally, for Bielema, losing a parent and a parent-in-law, and then on the field as well. And now that you kind of have time removed from it, and you also have most of your team intact. Yes, it sucks to not have Devin Witherspoon or Sidney or Chase Brown there. It does. But everybody else is playing. You're healthy. And as it comes to the running back position, I don't mind seeing some other guys there because guess what? Chase wasn't going to be here next year anyway. Let's see what we got. And apparently McCray is healthy. Reggie Love's ready to go. Your offensive line is healthy. They're ready to block for him. And then you have a secondary where you still got Quan Martin, and you still got Kendall Smith, and you still got Taz Nicholson. And now you get to see some of the pieces like Matthew Bailey out there, or Strain, or Terrell Jennings. So I don't mind it so much. It's kind of having your cake and eating it too, in that you are getting the full product for the most part. But you're also getting to see a little preview for next year in positions where you're going to see new faces. I think that's okay. The continuity is a little better than I would have thought, even losing your defensive coordinator, and I will get to Ryan Walters in just a bit. But this is a pretty fully intact Illinois team. And if you were to ask me, well, how do you feel about the game? I think Illinois wins. I just do. Now, I also said that Illinois would beat Michigan State and that they would beat Purdue. And at one point, I thought they'd beat Michigan. And then, of course, I thought they beat Northwestern, which I was right on that at least. But that wasn't a difficult pick to make. But let's look at it this way. Mississippi State, you would argue, would have the mental advantage, right? They'll be playing an emotional game for their fallen coach who died about 3 weeks ago, I believe. And that, of course, is going to be hovering over that stadium on January 2nd. But I also don't want to overstate that. And I also want to be careful because, that emotional thing, that wave may not last for 60 minutes of game time. I think if Illinois can weather that initial storm, they'll be fine. I think overall Illinois is probably the better team. This is a Mississippi State team where it took all they had to beat Ole Miss in that Egg Bowl, and that is a rivalry game. I get that. But did you watch Ole Miss in the bowl game? I know I'm doing transitive property stuff here, but I do sometimes question what was Mississippi State's best win. They are a solid 8-4 team. Illinois is a solid 8-4 team. I just happen to think that Illinois might be actually a little bit better. But here's the key. Who's the coach? You got Bret Bielema, and the staff, for the most part, still here. So Bret Bielema against this interim, now full-time coach from Mississippi State, Arnett, who is going to have those guys fired up given the circumstances, but you don't have Mike Leach calling plays on the other end. I don't think that's really being accounted for enough. That guy was an offensive genius, one of the best play callers in college football history, and he's not going to be making calls on January 2nd. You can't just replace that. So give me the team that didn't have to go through the death of a head coach and their primary play caller. And that might sound callous that I'm even just, saying like that's a factor. Oh, he died. Don't forget about that, guys. That might play into the game. But it is true. When you finally get these players on the field and they play a football game, Mike Leach won't be making those calls. And we cannot pretend like that's not a big deal. I think it's a huge deal. So I just have this feeling that Illinois is going to win that game. If they don't, it'd be a bummer, but I'll get over it quickly because overall it was still a successful season. And unlike, let's say, when Illinois got the 1 seed and lost to Loyola, and then the next 2 months happened, and we're wondering what the hell is going to happen in this basketball program, this offseason has already seen some moments that maybe scared us a little bit, but then very quickly Bret Bielema figures things out. Now, this to me seems like a nice transition into Luke Altmeyer. 3-year quarterback is what you're probably getting. And for someone with that pedigree that came from Ole Miss, that learned under Lane Kiffin, who's a pretty damn good eye for quarterback talent, you got to like what you're getting here. Now, I understand he doesn't have the experience that a Tommy DeVito did, but I don't know how many guys like that you're going to necessarily get. A 6-year quarterback. And bear in mind that Tommy DeVito was not a sure thing either. When we got Tommy DeVito to commit, we all agreed probably better than Brandon Peters. But it's not as if everybody was ecstatic and over the moon. But Barry Lunny, as a play caller, which I have issues with Barry Lunny, but he worked wonders with Tommy DeVito and gave Tommy by far his best season. 70% completion percentage, hardly any picks, bunch of touchdowns. And before Tommy got hurt, he was able to use his legs a little bit more as well. Well, Luke Altmeyer has very much the same skill set, has the ability to run, is really good in short and intermediate routes, and as a decent arm, maybe not the gunslinger that a few other guys in the Big Ten West may be this year. But what I love the most out of all this, in addition to the fact that I think Barry Lunny will construct an offense that will be efficient and maybe not the most high scoring, but it won't ask too much of a Luke Altmeyer, it's the fact that you get him for 1, 2, maybe 3 years. It's the continuity that you finally get in the quarterback room where you went from a Brandon Peters, which I had many issues with him, to a Tommy DeVito, which, darn it, I wish he could have gotten that waiver. But what if we find out that Luke Altmeyer has a pretty good first year and then just continues to grow? I think that's a trade-off worth making. So Tommy DeVito and Barry Lunny made this a much easier sales job. And they bring in a guy that was, by many accounts, including 24/7, a top 10 transfer quarterback. He is not Hudson Card, but who's to say that he won't be as successful, if not more so, than a Hudson Card? To me, the unknowns, sure, they're a little scary, but it's also exciting. The idea that this guy will be ours, and this is not a stopgap. I don't know if Hudson Card has 1 or 2 years of eligibility, and maybe someone in the chat thread does, but to me, I'm overall very optimistic that Luke Altmeyer will do well and actually probably do very well here. Um, Bear in mind as well, really good offensive line, we presume, next year, and a wide receiver room that's got a lot of depth. Overall, it's shaping up nicely for him. So that was a big get from Bielema and Barry Lunny, and it goes to show you how far this program has come, where you can just walk into an SEC quarterback room and say, we want you. Okay, great, I'll come play. No, was he a star at Ole Miss? He was not, but he was vying for that starting position before the season started. Dart won it. Dart, pretty damn good quarterback. Well, now you get yours. So was it a A-plus acquisition? Well, we don't know that yet. That would all come down to Luke Altmeyer, what he does on the field. But while there are some questions, I think overall that's a really good pickup, and he will be your starter. So it feels like you crossed one off the list, and you crossed off the most important position, and we'll see what the depth pieces are like in the second and third string. But really big move. And this comes on the heels, of course, of Hudson Card going to Purdue. I want to hit this real quick and not bemoan or hit on this point too long. Before I do, let me get some water here. Ryan Walters. Congrats on the job. Thank you for everything you did for us. I mean, he made this Illinois defense elite in just 2 years with the help of Kevin Kane, with the help of Aaron Henry, and don't forget Bret Bielema. Oh, and Andy Boo, who's still here. He gets the opportunity to be a head coach at Purdue. You have to take it. So there is no shame in that. Good on him. Happy for him. Happy for Kevin Kane getting promoted to a defensive coordinator position. The Hudson Card thing happened as Karen and I were just about to Michigan, and I got to be honest, when that news came across, I thought, you have got to be kidding me. These things happen. It's a move that he has to make if he wants his program to be better. So, again, no fault of Ryan Walters. But keep in mind, this is not an Illinois Fighting Illini journalistic objective podcast. This is a fan podcast, so I can say what I'm about to say. There was a tweet when that news came out of Ryan Walters kind of listening to a song in his car, bobbing his head, a little swag. And it was at that moment where I realized, I hope they lose every game, and I hope we kick their ass next year. I won't go as far as to say that I want them to fail at Purdue. But here's the thing. Because it's a trophy game, and because you're both in the Big Ten West, and I'm assuming after realignment you will still be playing each other more often than not, yeah, I don't want him to succeed, and if that means he fails, so be it. I'm sorry. You're on the other team now. You went and you got a quarterback that we wanted. For all I know, there might be one or two players on our roster that follow you. I don't think Isaiah Williams, from what he said yesterday, is one of those, and he is a team captain. Corey Patterson, of course, going to Purdue, and Isaiah Williams said he's happy for him, but we'll see them next year. So I don't know if you have much to worry about there. Maybe Reggie Love, who's close with Corey Patterson, goes there. I'm not sure how it all shakes out, but I do know that he took this quarterback that you wanted, and probably, yes, wanted more than Luke Altmeyer. And that little video, that was it. That was all I needed to say, you know what, no. We aren't treating this with kid gloves. You're on the other team. You're on a rival. Screw you. I hope you lose a bunch of games. That's it. You know, this is college sports, big money business. Now the players are starting to get that money, but the coaches still far and away making much more. So I don't usually play the world's smallest violin for any coaches or any coordinators because that is a cushy gig. And I'm certainly not going to play for Ryan Walters. I think there is something to be said as well. Jeff Johnson is an Illini football writer. He's been covering them for a long time. You can find him on Twitter. And he has almost like a stream of consciousness column that he writes about. And he had some thoughts on Twitter as well regarding Ryan Walters, and that there's no sure thing. And this is one thing that I think happens. A coach gets hired, the local media falls in love with him as they did with Ryan Walters, this 36, 38-year-old phenom, my age basically, who is a brilliant defensive mind and certainly has no problems motivating players or getting them to do what he wants. Yes, he is a rising star. However, there is the possibility he flames out. There is. And it's like, well, duh, Carp, Captain Obvious over here. But what Jeff Johnson was making the point of in a tweet that it made me think back to that video of him bobbing his head. Yeah, we got our guy. How do you like me now? Kind of thing. There's an arrogance to that for a guy that's yet to be a head coach in any D1 or FCS, what have you. I don't know if he's ever been a head coach in a game of football at any level. This is a risk for a Purdue team that just lost Jeff Brom to Louisville. Very good coach, won 8-9 games a year at Purdue. We don't talk about that enough, I think, that they had stunk before that. There is a chance they stink again. And yes, they got their quarterback. And yes, Graham Harrell, the air raid offense, they will be slinging the ball around 40, 50 times a game. And of course, that was attractive to a guy like Hudson Card. And he got the call from Drew Brees. And he, of course, idolizes Drew Brees. And that's all fine and good. Purdue does have a lineage of good quarterbacks. They do. But as it comes to Ryan Walters and how successful he may or may not be, don't fall into the trap like a Greg Doyle or Tom Dienhart or some other guys over there might have, that this guy is the prodigal son. I don't know if that's the right terminology for it or not. There's no sure thing. There never is in college football. And I certainly don't think a coach that's never been a head coach in a game yet, what are the odds that this is as good as Jeff Brom? I'd say less than 50%. And if it's anything like Jeff Brom or better, wouldn't he be poached eventually by an SEC school? In other words, if he's the rising star that we all think, he's not long for Purdue. But there's the other side of it, too, where it may not work out, and he has to then go back and be a defensive coordinator at a very high level and work his way back up to head. That video got me, and it was actually kind of reassuring to be reminded, like, yeah, he might have coached for you before, but he doesn't coach for you now. So you can root against him, and you can root against him vehemently, and I will. I don't want Purdue to have success. I want them to lose every freaking game they play. Hudson Card, good luck to you. Luke Altmeyer, be good, please. I'm optimistic that he will be. But, yeah, it's nice to kind of recalibrate sometimes and remind yourselves the fun of sports. I like my team, and I don't like yours. Purdue, you are on my crap list more than any other Big Ten school right now. We can't beat you in basketball. Our former defensive coordinator, you just happen to decide we want him. And, yeah, he gets Kevin Kane, he gets Corey Patterson, he gets the quarterback. It's just, it's annoying how it all kind of shook out. Hopefully that's the end of it. No more attrition. But I'm sorry, look at his staff. Is his staff as good as Bret Bielema's? No. No, it is not. First time running a program, all I'm saying is wait and see. Okay, this is from K. Andrew. Let's see. One of my best buddies is a longtime NFL Films coworker who follows college outside Illinois, especially SEC, than I do. He preferred Luke to Hudson when rumors about their Illini visit were fresh, which makes me even happier. Yeah, and here's the thing, K. Andrew. He could be better, right? I think the Hudson Card thing and why he was more of the sure thing is that we've just seen more of him. And we saw him against Alabama this year, and he looked pretty damn good against them. So that, of course, yeah, that was my number one. And then when that didn't happen, it was more just get Luke. Get Luke. We can work with that, and I think you can. And K. Andrew also says it's going to be hard to beat them next year, and they're going to hound us on the recruiting trail like we haven't seen before. Hound us. Hope they lose, but it'll be tough. It is at Purdue, K. Andrew. I would just say that aren't we frickin' due to beat them? Please? Aren't we due to beat Purdue? And if you're a Purdue fan for whatever reason listening to this, yes, I don't like you guys, but it's because you're beating us. So it's no insult. I'm just annoyed. That's all. I'm just very annoyed. Bobo says Hudson Card will have 2 years of eligibility. Okay. This is from Jason, back to the bowl game. Illinois needs to realize after the passing of Leach, they are no longer the cute story. They need to embrace the villain role. I like that, Jason, because I think this team played with a chip on their shoulder early, and then inevitably that flips when you're 7-1 and you're coming home for a 2-game homestand. I didn't think it would flip as much as it did, and this team lost that edge against Michigan State and Purdue. I hope they can regain that, and if they got to play the villain role, so be it. Yes, I'm also glad that I'm not going to be watching the telecast because Mike Leach should get his due, no doubt. But there's still a football game to be played. I hope from the stadium there will be the acknowledgement beforehand. There should be a nice, more than just a moment of silence for a fallen football legend. But then the game starts, and that's done. And then we just have two teams playing ball. I think that's how it'll happen, and I'm not too worried about that. But watching it on TV, you're going to get an earful. So look forward to that. Okay, let's see if there's anything else here before I hit up a couple more things today. Yeah, Jason mentions Wisconsin. They land 2 starting quarterbacks in the portal. They added a Mordecai from SMU today. That's a big get for them. And Jason says, if Dion has success, moves on, and Colorado calls Walters, he will bolt in a heartbeat. See, the thing is, Jason, it all depends what conference they're in. Purdue is that much more attractive just by virtue of being in the Big Ten. I don't know where Colorado is going to be by the time that job would open back up. If there's going to be a Pac-12, if they're going to move to the SEC or the Big 12, I mean, there's going to be all these convergences that maybe they're in a better spot than Purdue, but somehow I doubt that. I'm just saying there's no guarantee, right? Okay, trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to talk about with football. Aaron Henry, we did have a podcast a couple weeks ago when he was announced today. There was a position hired, the DB coach. Let me make sure that I get the name right here. It does sort of appear like Bret Bielema is essentially turning this into Wisconsin South, and I have zero problems with that. So you get Aaron Henry, a former player of his, that takes on the position of defensive coordinator, and then Antonio Fenelus, I believe is the pronunciation for that. And yeah, let me just give you from the Illini Inquirer kind of the details on this guy. He's a Boca Raton native, the third former Badgers player who played under Bielema on this current defensive staff, joining Aaron Henry and defensive line coach Terrence Jamison. By the way, quick side note, Terrence Jamison, according to Bielema, will get bumped up some. Not just a D-line coach, but probably something in addition, I'm sure a pay bump as well. Fenelus is the first, or Fenelus, we'll see, is the first of three hires Bielema must make this offseason after losing three assistants to Purdue this month. This is from Jeremy Warner at Illini Inquirer. A statement from Bret Bielema: I've been waiting for the opportunity to hire Antonio here to Illinois since coming here. He brings a coaching resume in several different systems and also coordinator experience to the defensive staff room. I have known Antonio from recruiting him out of Boca Raton to bringing him full circle to our coaching staff. He and his family will be a great addition to our campus and community. All right, so Fenelus will be reunited with Bielema, his college head coach, and D coordinator Aaron Henry. A 4-year letter winner at Wisconsin, Fenelus, I'm guessing here, helped Wisconsin to Big Ten titles in 2010 and 2011. He was a 2-time All-Big Ten first-team selection, earning the honor after 56 tackles, 4 interceptions, and 7 pass breakups as a junior, and again as a senior. In his career, he recorded 155 tackles, 22 passes defended, 9 interceptions, and 3 forced fumbles in 52 games, 32 of them as starts. Okay, his coaching career started back at Wisconsin when he was a graduate assistant working with the Badgers defensive backs from 2015 to 17 under D-backs coach Jim Leonard, who was then a position coach. He then served as defensive coordinator and defensive backs coach at East Central University from 2018 to 20 before moving to LSU for the past 2 seasons, where he worked directly with the defensive backs. So technically he was a defensive analyst at LSU. Quick reaction from Jeremy. He's a little bit more in tune with this stuff than I am. He says that Fenelus gives Bielema and Henry a lot of familiarity from the Wisconsin days. He also gives, and this is the important part, Illinois an instant recruiter in Florida, where Henry has been a dynamic presence for Illinois. But with Henry taking on coordinator duties, he's expected to take a step back somewhat on the recruiting trail. Fenelus is a young, first-time Power 5 assistant coach, so it would make sense if Bielema went with a more experienced option for the outside linebackers vacancy. Bielema has said that he's looking into NFL options for the position, and on Thursday he said he has 5 to 6 options at the position with a focus on improving pass rush. So, coaching staff is starting to fill in. We have a bit more idea of next year's roster, and in the next 2 weeks we'll have even more of an idea. I think it's January 16th, I think, is the NFL draft deadline. And Johnny Newton said yesterday, I don't know what I'm going to do. Can you somehow get Johnny Newton back? Wouldn't that be a coup? Keith Randolph, we don't know. Seth Coleman, we don't know. Tariq Barnes, we don't know. Julian Pearl, we don't know. But let's say you keep most of them. I think this is going to be a really good team next year, too. And we got a bowl game to play. We got some other things to figure out. But overall, I don't sense that this team next year is going to have some dramatic drop-off. It seems like they are pretty well-rounded, and there aren't too many, gaping holes in that roster, whereas as an Illini football fan, I'm used to entering off seasons with a whole hell of a lot more questions than answers. It feels like the lingering questions going into each offseason under Bielema are getting smaller and smaller, and that you were able to, at least perception-wise in my mind, able to withstand losing an elite defensive coordinator to a rival, and somehow 2 weeks later I'm thinking, yeah, we'll be fine. I don't know if Aaron Henry is going to be as good as Ryan Walters, but I think the continuity between him and Andy Boo and Jamison on that defensive staff, along with Bielema, I think that's good enough to produce, yet again, a good defense. I think offensively, you take a jump under year 2 of Barry Lunny, and by no means am I going to say that you're better without Chase Brown, but what I am anxious to see is how the play calling differs when you don't have a bell cow back like a Chase Brown. You're going to still run the ball, no doubt. But do you see things open up a little bit more? Do you see a little more comfort with Barry Lunny in this play calling? And he's got 3 years to work with Altmeyer on this. So overall, it's not like I'm going to go into next season saying 8-4, but the schedule is advantageous. And I do think that should be a bowl team next year. And really all you need them to do next year is make a bowl, right? That's the baseline. Anything under that would be a disappointment. And anything above that would feel pretty good. So it's a nice position to be in where here we get to enjoy this bowl game. I would love to go 9-4, as I mentioned earlier. I think they do go 9-4. And then you have a whole offseason. I mean, we're at a point now where I'm excited for the spring game. I'll be planning a tailgate for the spring football game. That's where this program is at, which I had not been to a spring game, I think, in 15 years. Probably 2008 was the last one. And I would be eager to get back to that. So here we are. I mean, it's the end of 2022. It was a hell of a year for Illini sports where you won a Big Ten title in basketball, finally. Illinois football, very successful year, especially by their standards. Illinois women apparently on the up and up. That's a pretty fruitful year for Illinois sports. And while the last month and a half had some very disappointing moments and some scary moments, things seem to be in a pretty good place. Now, before I get out of here, okay, cool. Got most of the chat thread stuff here. Before I get out of here, basketball, watched the Bethune-Cookman game last night. My dad offered me tickets to it, and I said, no, thanks, but no thanks. We had gotten back from Michigan, got a pack for Florida, and after the Missouri game, I had no interest. And last night I tuned in this sort of show me something. And immediately you see the change made in the starting lineup, which I thought worked well. Sincere Harris needs to start. I don't care at what expense. If that means Sky Clark or Jaden Epps don't get the start, too bad. Sincere Harris needs to get the start because he sets a tone. And what this team did against Missouri and what this team did against Penn State and Maryland, for that matter, they came out flat. You do not come out flat when Sincere Harris is on the court. And he might not be the best scoring threat, though we did bank in a 3 yesterday. He had a nice layup as well. He does so many things defensively that you must have him on the court. You have to. It sets the tone. It did last night. I know against an inferior opponent, but he's been doing that same sort of thing against the good teams too. Sincere Harris must start, even when Sky Clark gets back. I don't care who you take out. That means Terrence Shannon Jr., Matthew Meyer, Coleman Hawkins, they're going to stay there. But I like Danger in the starting lineup. I do. Because offensively, that gives you an easy bucket if you aren't making those threes early. Because God knows this team loves shooting threes. 8 for 28 last night, I think. Though you can probably look at the 1 for 8 by RJ and the 1 for 6 from Matthew Meyer as to why your numbers were so low. You take those guys out of it, all of a sudden you are 6 for 14. So that's almost 50% for the other guys. Still too many threes, too careless with the ball. But defensively, I was encouraged by what I saw. The intensity, at least in the first 25 minutes of the game, a lull in the second half when you had a 35-point lead. I guess that's to be expected. I'm not too freaked out about that. And then he picked it up at the very end of it as well. Defensively, I was impressed. I thought offensively, they were a little bit more precise in the cuts and the screens. And, you finally saw that aggressiveness kind of come back. I would like to think hitting bottom against Missouri will ultimately do good things for this team. Missouri beat Kentucky fairly resoundingly a couple nights ago. So Missouri might not be bad, but that doesn't excuse how bad you were against them. So it's going to be very telling when this team plays Northwestern next Thursday or next Wednesday, how they come out and play against a Big Ten team on the road. And what should be a fun environment that will be probably 60, 70% Illinois fans, as it always is up there, but it's still a road game. It just never feels comfortable at Walsh Ryan for some reason. You got to win that. And in January, you got some opportunities at home to really get the season back on the right track. It's all right there in front of them, right? Part of the reason I love basketball is how quickly not just a game can turn around, but a season can turn around. I do recall back in 2002, Frank Williams and that team started 3-5 in the Big Ten. after a loss on Super Bowl Sunday at home to Michigan State. They won the last 8, won a share of the Big Ten. But that was rock bottom. It felt like this is the worst encore I've seen as an Illini basketball fan because that team was coming back to make a Final Four. Of course, they did not. They made a Sweet 16 and lost to Kansas. But things were really dark on Super Bowl Sunday. They figured it out. Brad Underwood's had teams where it's looked bad. Not as bad as the Missouri game we saw a week ago, but it's looked bad before, and they found ways to get back. So basketball does lend itself to these sort of comebacks within a game, but also within a season. And it felt like last night, for the first time in a while, they were just playing ball. And what I mean by that is there was a heaviness that started to set in the second half of the Penn State game that carried over to the Missouri game. They were just sluggish. They were thinking too much. I think Brad Underwood was thinking too much. It was just getting too complicated. You got enough talent. Just go out and do the simple things. And this is an Illinois team that, talent-wise, if they just play harder than the other team, I think they're going to win most games. Or they're going to win more often than not. And that's an NCAA tournament team and the top half of the Big Ten. I think that's the new litmus test. Let's start there. I'm not going to predict this team to win a Big Ten title anymore, starting in an 0-2 hole and seeing a few tendencies last night that still make me question, okay, this is a weird team. What do we really got here? But I was encouraged overall, and I think they can figure it out. But what is the combination of players that does the best for this team? That remains to be seen. I consider it a process, okay? I'll lighten up a little bit. I am a little bit worried about, let's say, a Coleman Hawkins, for example. You know, I know all the good things that he brings to this team, which are many. But, man, he can be careless with the ball and careless of the shot selection. See, you're asking now a third-year player, rein it in a bit. You know, just play within yourself. Don't get too spastic and crazy out there. And yet he still had those moments against Bethune-Cookman. Danger, no complaints about him last night. Sincere Harris, no complaints about him. Jaden Epps, solid game. Terrence Shannon Jr., aggressive again. Matthew Meyer didn't shoot well, but overall played pretty well. RJ is the concern. I don't know what you get from him the rest of the year. You can't count on him. We know that, and maybe there's a lingering shoulder thing going on. I'm not sure, but he's not good right now. And last night there was a moment where, because he didn't get after a loose ball, Bethune-Cookman got it, and they got an and one. It put another Illini player in a bad position defensively. They had to foul. Bethune-Cookman makes it a three-point play. Immediately Underwood takes him out. There was this look on RJ's face like, what? And that's got to be frustrating for Underwood. I don't know what you do. I think you just play him less and you gradually get him comfortable again. Because last year when he had his most success, there was zero pressure on him. Just come out, run around a bit, dunk it sometimes, shoot a 3 or 2 a game. 1 for 8, though. He's not a sharpshooter. He's a microwave. When he's making them, he makes a lot, and when he's not, don't shoot it. Overall, though, positives. And next Wednesday, when we get back from Florida, I don't know if I'll do I guess I'll do a second half pod for that one. Though I'd much rather just probably talk about hopefully a bowl win than Illinois Northwestern. But if we're being honest, that's a pretty big game, and they kind of need it. You lose that, and then you're kind of right back where you started from. And Northwestern is not good. Don't let a few early wins fool you into that. But they aren't terrible, and you can't suck against them because they would beat you if you do. All I'm asking from this team, just go out, play harder than the other team, and if they do that, they're going to win a lot of games this year. And I hope that switch flipped a little bit against Bethune-Cookman. It's like the time away just did everybody good. And I think Underwood, I noticed, at least on the TV last night, that he was taking a step back as well. A little bit less on them. I think you need to just kind of gauge the temperature. You know, again, I've done this comparison between coaching and teaching, which is apples and oranges, especially what he does and what I do. But I got a class period that I was really struggling with, and I realized that the more I was riding them and trying to get them to do exactly what I needed to, there was more pushback. And I found and have found in the second quarter of the school year this way that, okay, this class responds differently than my other 4, and if I take it a little bit easier in certain respects, but still establish boundaries, we found some success. That is a long-winded way of a middle school teacher saying, you got to play to your audience, right? And this team is going to have a different personality than last year's and the year before that. And as a coach, he needs to figure that out. I don't mind aggressiveness. I don't mind huffing and puffing. But if it ain't registering, you got to take a new approach. You cannot score a peg round hold this thing. And I'm hoping that Underwood learns a few things. And ultimately, by the end of the season, it would be great to look at this season as one where everybody learned a lesson, right? Everybody learned something about themselves. And I think that's possible. I think it's possible. And what I'm most anxious to see is how this journey, cliche as may sound, how this journey unfolds and where we find this team at the end of the year. And I still think they can be pretty damn good. Of course, I'm just less sure of that now than I was entering the year and certainly after the Texas win. But that's basketball, right? We're a football school, right? Or so I feel right now, at least, with the January 2nd. Let's see here, everybody. Trying to think if there's anything else in the chat thread. I appreciate you guys tuning in on this Friday afternoon. It doesn't really feel like a Friday. I mean, when it's winter break, I lose all sense of that. But Kara and I will be flying out on Sunday morning to Tampa. We get to spend the whole day there on New Year's Day, wake up early on the 2nd, and go to the Reliaquest Bowl. I'm excited. If anyone's in Tampa, I'll be in my Juice T-shirt. Going to hook up with Lon. Going to hook up with Isaac down there. And I'm just ready for warmth. I'm ready for one more football game. This is... listen, anytime you get a 13th game in a season, that's something as a Illini fan I'm going to really cherish. And I think going forward, I'm going to try to make a concerted effort to go to most bowl games. It's a great excuse during winter break to just go someplace. And early on, I kind of wanted the Music City. When things were falling apart, I thought just Music City, more people can go down there. It's an easy trip. But now as time has went on, I'm getting excited for what used to be the Outback Bowl. I'm really happy we're in it. I'm really happy that we get a Florida Bowl game on New Year's Day or January 2nd, and I'm sure that I'll see some of you guys down there for it. If you're watching it here, hopefully it is a nice television experience on what looks to be a 62-degree day in Champaign. Not 82, and it looks to be rainy up here, but enjoy it nonetheless because this is the biggest bowl game Illinois has played in since the Rose Bowl, and the nation will be watching. It's the first game of the day, a day full of great bowl games. So I'm excited for all of that. Bobo, a Carp Lawn, and Isaac Pod. Not sure about that. Isaac is on official athletic department business. Lon will be with Andrew, his son, down there. And I don't think I'm going to pod. I know that Jeremy and Joey will have you guys covered in the Illini Inquirer pod after the game. They're really good with that. They had a emergency pod yesterday with Luke Altmeyer. That news breaking. I hope to hook up with Jeremy and say hi to Joey as well down there. So I'll be texting them tonight and see if we can all meet up before the game and before they have to go in and cover stuff. With a noon start down there, I think we plan on getting to the stadium around 9. I don't know where we're going to party. I mean, we don't have anyone down there with a car, so do we just walk around with a few drinks? I don't know. There is this fan experience at Steinbrenner Field, which is a Yankees fan who was like, oh, this is perfect. But we are not paying $45 a person to get one free drink ticket and some appetizers. I'll look at Steinbrenner Field. I'll wave to it. Hello, Yankees minor league complex. And then I'll focus back on the bowl game. And but, yeah, if anybody's around, tweet me, send me a direct message or something. I'm sure I'll see you around. And this is going to be fun. It feels like, again, I got nothing but orange and blue stuff in my bag. I'm going to wear nothing but orange and blue stuff on the flight to and from. Why the hell not? I'm relishing this, and hopefully this is not the last warm weather bowl that we get to go to for a while. But with Illinois football, you never know. So it's that double-sided thing where I think long-term we're in really good shape. But also, given past history, I'm going to enjoy every moment of this one, and I hope you do too. All right, last podcast before the new year. What a year it's been. I want to thank the sponsors for being with us throughout 2022. That, of course, is DP Dough at dpdough.com. Order a piping hot calzone during bowl season. They'll bring it to your doorstep at dpdough.com. Also, Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728. That's 217-841-4728 for Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. State Farm agent Brian Hansen online at brianismyguy.com. For life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it, Brian is my guy, and he could be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. And finally, Rector Construction at rectorconstruction.com for all your home exterior projects. That is rectorconstruction.com. For Illini Inquirer and the Champagne Showers Podcast Network, for our sponsors, for all of you. Thank you for the few that tuned in on YouTube on a Friday late afternoon, early evening. I'm going to go watch some more bowl games and just sit back and relax, and driving up to Chicago tomorrow, park, sleep, and fly. Pew, take the 6 a.m. bright and early to Tampa and get to 75-degree temperatures. I'm ready. All right, if I see any of you down there, be sure to say hello. The hair will be just like this if you see me on YouTube right now. And I will be wearing either orange, blue, white, or some combination thereof. In the meantime, have a great rest of your 2022. We'll see you in 2023, and hopefully with a 9-4 football team. It is the 200 level. All right, everybody. Wanted to pack a longer one in there. I think we got about an hour. So thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it, everybody, and enjoy the bowl game. Enjoy your New Year's, and I will see you probably on January 4th right back here, and we'll get back to the 2-3 podcasts a week. We'll get back in the swing of things. So take care, everybody. We'll see you.